Have you ever stopped and wondered, if the world we live in is really the best it could be? Or if maybe our own goals, even our country's goals, line up with something, well, bigger, maybe even divine? Welcome to the Deep Dive. We love getting into the heart of challenging ideas, and today's no exception. We're diving into some powerful excerpts from a sermon called God's True Nation by the Korean evangelist, Reverend Sun Myung. So our mission today is to really unpack Reverend Moon's perspective. It's quite challenging, often provocative, looking at where humanity stands, his unique take on salvation, and this ambitious idea he lays out for building what he calls God's true nation right here on Earth. Yeah, get ready, because it's likely to challenge some things you might take for granted about, well, religion, politics, even how society works. Now, before we jump in, just a reminder, our aim here is to explore and explain the ideas in this sermon objectively. We're looking at the source material, helping you understand the perspective, not necessarily saying we agree or disagree with it. It's all about exploration and understanding. Okay, so let's get into it. Reverend Moon kicks things off with this massive question, really. He asks if we can honestly be proud of our cultures, our traditions, even the best parts, throughout all eternity and before all humanity. And then, bang, he just states it. The world as a whole is not the ideal place to live in. It's quite an opening statement.
It really is. And what's striking is the why behind it. It's not just about, obvious problems like war or poverty. He argues that even things we think are good, like smiles and laughter, well, they haven't truly pleased God since the fall of man. He says it's because people are born from a stained lineage of a heritage of sin. Even kids. He points to Romans 3.23, suggesting this isn't just about individual choices, but something deeper, an inherited separation from God's original ideal.
Wow. Okay. So a fundamental disconnect, not just surface level problems. If the world's in that state, what's God doing about it, according to Moon? Is God just watching?
Oh, not at all passive. The sermon portrays God as actively working, but it's a gradual process. He calls it God's providence of restoration. See, Moon explains God can't just fix everything all at once, because in his view, everyone is separated from him.
Yeah.
So the approach is little by little. It starts apparently by finding one person, one single man, a central figure who meets God's standard. From that one person, the plan expands. Restore a family, then a nation, and finally the whole world.
Like ripples in a pond, starting from a single point.
Exactly. But it's a huge long-term project. It takes time. God needs time to develop this providence, building it up piece by piece.
Okay, that gradual, layered approach makes sense in that framework. And that sets up his critique of how Christians usually think about salvation, right?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. He looks at traditional Christianity and notes how sincere Christians today pray earnestly and strive to lead a life of faith in order to ensure their own salvation. And maybe, they try to save their families too.
Which sounds pretty standard, actually.
Right. But Moon asks, is that enough for what God truly wants? The sermon argues pretty strongly that this focus just on yourself and your family is actually a cause for Christianity losing influence. He flips it. He says if Christians struggle to win our nation under God's will, then their families, and themselves too, would automatically be included in the scope of that salvation.
Ah, I see. So aim for the bigger target, the nation under God, and the smaller targets like individual and family salvation are covered as part of that bigger victory.
Precisely. It's about prioritizing the higher goal, believing it encompasses the lower ones. It totally reframes what salvation is really about.
And he connects this idea back to the time of Jesus, doesn't he? To show this isn't a new problem.
Exactly. He paints a picture of Jesus's time, saying people then, especially the Jewish people, expected the Messiah to, save them, maybe get revenge on Rome, make Israel the top nation. They never dreamed, Moon says, that when the Messiah came, he would want them to sacrifice themselves and their nation for the sake of the world. According to this sermon, that misunderstanding, that failure to grasp the bigger global self-sacrificial purpose was a key reason they couldn't fully accept Jesus, and it ultimately led to the crucifixion.
So they were focused on national salvation, but missed the call for world salvation through national sacrifice. That's a heavy interpretation.
It is. And then he drives it home by asking us to think like God. If you were in God's position, would you prefer to save one nation or just one individual? Or the whole world?
Yeah.
For Moon, the answer is obvious. God's aim is the whole world. Everything else, individuals, nations, they're part of that much larger plan.
Okay, so if established religions aren't quite getting this global sacrificial vision, right, in Moon's view, What about politics? He talks about communism, right? Which was a huge deal back then.
He does. And he acknowledges its ideal, to unite the whole world into one, this vision of a perfect, happy world. Sounds good on paper. But then he points out its failures in practice. He mentions the splits, like between the Soviet Union and China, as evidence it wasn't working. His explanation. While communism talks about unity, the nations involved cannot put the ideology into practice because deep down they want to dominate the other. They don't truly respect the value of the view of other people.
So the ideal was there, but national self-interest got in the way.
Exactly. Moon argues that for any ideology to truly unite the world, its proponents, its nations, would have to be ready to sacrifice their own people for the sake of the whole world. They'd need to move beyond just tribal or national thinking. It's a very high bar.
A very high bar indeed. And he doesn't let the democratic world, specifically the U.S., off the hook either, does he?
Nope. No one escapes the critique. He actually praises the U.S. for a time when it was acting more globally, being the leading nation of the world, working to equalize the conditions all over the world by aid to other countries. He saw that as positive, but then he observes what he calls a recent shift. He sees policymakers becoming more isolationist, thinking of the benefit of this country alone and having nothing to do with the outside world.
A turn inward, basically.
Right. And he connects this to America's Christian roots. He says quite directly, if the U.S. would put themselves in the position of Jesus and pray to God, let the whole world be saved, even if our nation may have to be sacrificed, then it could keep its greatness. He even suggests it could be resurrected as Jesus was and truly save the world. But without that willingness for ultimate sacrifice for the global good, well, the implication is it loses its way, its divine purpose.
That's a profound challenge to a nation's identity and purpose.
Absolutely. And he concludes that section by saying, basically, no nation today, not even a small one, seems willing to step up and take on that kind of self-sacrificing global leadership.
Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice just keeps coming up. It really feels like the absolute core principle here. What's the underlying logic? Why is it so central?
Well, connecting the dots in the sermon, it seems Moon sees sacrifice as like a fundamental law of creation and restoration. It's not just a good deed, it's how things work. He argues God himself engaged in it, poured out all his being into the universe he made. That act of creation was, in itself, a sacrifice. So following that pattern, in the process of restoration, whoever is in the subject position, the giver, the initiator, must be ready to pour out all their being to those in the object position, the receiver. It mirrors God's initial act.
Wow, okay, so it's like a cosmic principle of giving, and this applies in layers, getting harder as you go outward.
Exactly. He lays out this very clear, and let's be honest, very demanding hierarchy. It goes like this. You must be ready to love your family more than yourself. Okay, maybe doable. Love your relatives more than your family. Getting harder. Love your nation more than your relatives.
Yeah.
Big jump there. And love the world more than your own nation.
That last step feels almost impossible for most people or nations.
He acknowledges how hard it is, especially crossing national lines with different cultures, histories, languages. That's where the rubber really meets the road for this kind of universal love. It's like expanding circles of sacrifice, each one requiring more letting go of self-interest.
And he uses biblical stories to show the kind of commitment he's talking about, right? These aren't small gestures.
Not at all. These are life-defining offerings. He mentions Noah, spending 120 years building the ark that's offering the best part of his life to God. Then Abraham asked to offer his wife, and later his beloved and only child, Isaac. Moon calls that sacrifice more difficult than to sacrifice his own self. And Moses, fasting 40 days, going through immense hardship to receive the law. The point of these examples isn't just the difficulty, though. The core message is, what we are going to save at the cost of the offering is greater than the thing we are going to sacrifice. The goal has to be worth the price.
The value received must outweigh the value given.
Lasha.
And you mentioned God sacrificing too. It's not just humans being asked to give things up.
Right. That's a key point in the sermon's theology. It says God has to give something for the salvation of man. It implies even God operates within this principle. Moon states God has to sacrifice the man who makes the offering. And even that a nation God prepared specifically to welcome the Messiah was meant to be sacrificed for the sake of the world, even if the people didn't get it at the time.
So it's a universal law of give and take, sacrifice, and restoration that applies even to God.
That seems to be the idea, yes.
Yeah.
It underlines just how absolutely central sacrifice is to this whole vision of how the world is meant to be restored.
Okay, so after all this focus on restoration, sacrifice, expanding love, what's the end game? What does this God's true nation actually look like in Reverend Moon's vision?
Well, the ultimate goal is crystal clear. It's to restore the nation which God can claim to be his. And how? By establishing the kingdom of God on earth. In this kingdom, national borders essentially dissolve in God's eyes. The whole earth will be our country, he says, and in God's sight there are no national boundaries. The vision is one of total unity. The whole world under God's will, where all nations put together, they will be one people in God, everyone cooperating to build this one global kingdom. It's incredibly ambitious.
A unified world under God, no borders. It sounds utopian, but where does the individual fit into such a massive global picture? Does one person even matter?
Oh, absolutely crucial. Despite the scale, Moon brings it right back down to the individual level. He says every one of you must be thinking of yourselves as a starting point. The instruction is personal. Individuals should get blessed in marriage, have children, and see themselves as true ancestors to descendants who will be citizens of the kingdom of God. He gives specific roles, too. Women are representatives of all women on earth and mothers to future generations worldwide. Men are representatives of all the men of the earth.
So you take on this huge representative identity.
Exactly. The personal mission is to deeply believe in this global vision and fight for it with gratefulness, to keep marching towards this glorious kingdom. So yeah, it's not just personal salvation, it's a global transformation, but it starts with every single person embracing this universal role and purpose.
We've certainly covered a lot today, digging into Reverend Sun Myung Moon's sermon, God's True Nation. It's a powerful call for, well, global unity, built on this foundation of radical self-sacrifice, and a redefinition of salvation that pushes way beyond personal or even national concerns. It definitely challenges a lot of common thinking about faith, about politics, about our own place in the grand scheme of things.
It really does. I mean, this vision of moving past self-interest, embracing this universal love for all humanity, even if it costs you or your group or your nation, it provides a pretty profound, if demanding, way to think about our responsibilities in the world. It suggests that getting to that ideal world, that true restoration, requires this massive commitment to something bigger than ourselves, even if it means significant sacrifice, personally and collectively.
Definitely a lot to chew on. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. If the ultimate goal, as Reverend Moon sees it, is this unified world, no borders, all under God, what sacrifices, maybe small, maybe large, in your own life, your family, your community, or even your view of your nation, might you need to consider if you wanted to contribute even a little towards that kind of vision? It's a challenging question, one that definitely sticks with you long after you first hear it.